On September 5th, 2021, Haunted Mine Drop, a drop tower ride that starts at the top of a mine shaft and drops 110 feet underground, was operating normally. At approximately 7:15 p.m., a 6-year-old female guest approached the attraction. She was taller than the ride's minimum height requirement of 46 inches, and thus was allowed to ride. She proceeded to sit down in seat number 3 on the Haunted Mine Drop. On the ride cycle before this one, seat number 3 was empty, and so the double seatbelt system used as the only restraint on this ride was still buckled. The guest sat on top of these seatbelts and placed the tail of one seatbelt over her lap. Haunted Mine Drop utilizes up to 2 operators for loading and unloading. Operator 1 began checking seatbelts on the ride. When he reached seat 3, he checked the restraint block where the first seatbelt rod was inserted and noted that it was inserted properly and locked. He then pulled on the tail of the seatbelt to ensure that it was locked. In doing this, he pulled the tail of the seatbelt out of the young guest's hands. He did not notice that the seatbelt was not properly positioned across the rider's lap. Operator 1 continued to check the other seats normally and returned to the control booth. The control panel for the ride showed an error on the HMI screen that would not allow the ride to start, as seat number 3 had not had its restraints cycled since the last ride. This ride has a built-in safety system that requires all seatbelts be removed and relocked between each cycle. Since this had not been done for seat number 3, the ride threw an error. Operator 1 was confused by this and returned to the seatbelt several times to ensure that the rods were properly inserted, not noticing that the young guest in seat number 3 was sitting on top of her seatbelts. At this point, Operator 2 came into the control booth to see what was going on. Operator 1 explained that the ride had an error that was preventing the ride from dispatching. Operator 2 took over and unlocked all the seatbelts for the ride and then went to recheck all of the restraints again. Operator 2 repeated the same actions as Operator 1, locking the seatbelt pins but not noticing that the seatbelt was not properly positioned over the guest in seat 3. Operator 2 returned to the control booth. As all restraints had now been cycled, the error was gone and the ride was dispatched by Operator 2. The 6-year-old guest in seat 3 fell 110 feet to the bottom of the ride and was killed. So what could have allowed this to happen? Clearly a lot went wrong, but one theme can be seen through the entire accident: inadequate operator training. But before we get too far into this, I want to emphasize something. These operators were not some deadbeat teenagers without a care in the world for others' safety. These operators were trying their best with the resources they were given. Accordingly, slander towards these operators will not be tolerated. They were affected by this accident in so many ways that will likely be with them for the rest of their lives. With that being said, let's look into the core of this accident: operator training. So when a ride is purchased from a manufacturer, the manufacturer includes a manual detailing how the ride should be operated and maintained. It is up to the ride's owners to train their employees based on this information. They may choose to train directly off the owner's manual or create their own operations manual for the ride based on the owner's manual. Glenwood Caverns chose to create their own operator training manual. That manual is displayed on your screen now. Yes, this is all of it. Needless to say, this manual has some issues that contributed to this accident. For example, it says nothing about ensuring that all seatbelts are unbuckled prior to loading new guests. It also does not mention anything about all restraints needing to be cycled in order to allow the ride to dispatch. Its instructions on checking seats are extremely vague, simply stating to pull the seatbelt over the passenger and insert rod into the restraint block. Gently tighten seatbelt against passenger and repeat step for each of the passengers. And if there is an empty seat, insert rod into appropriate restraint block. This wording does not suggest an order or promote any kind of consistent pattern when checking restraints. Instead, the vague writing here leaves a lot of room for individual operator or trainer interpretation. The most damning thing about this manual, in my opinion, is the fact that nowhere in the operation manual does it even mention the control panel's HMI screen, let alone the errors that can be displayed on it. The HMI screen is a touchscreen on the ride's main control panel that displays the status of seats and displays errors. It's a common feature on many modern rides. Operators not being trained on this means that operators had no idea what errors on this screen meant or how to safely resolve them. Additionally, the manual does not detail how to use the restraint unlock feature of the ride, or what to do when this feature is used, even though the restraint unlock feature was used by the operators seconds before this accident. The brevity of this manual helps to explain the operator's confusion on September 5th. The official state findings from this accident blame operator error as the operators failed to notice that the guest was seated on top of, not under, her seatbelt, and the operators failed to understand and properly respond to the error given to them by the ride's HMI screen. The state says that the operator error was caused by a lack of specific operator procedures, inadequate training, more than one operator taking control of the situation during a single ride cycle, and the specific restraint system involved. Glenwood Caverns were required to retrain all of their operators for all attractions other than the Haunted Mine Drop before the other rides in the park were allowed to reopen. Haunted Mine Drop remains closed and will remain so until the factors that caused this accident are corrected and the ride is re-inspected by the state. Whether Glenwood Caverns will pursue this route or close the ride permanently remains to be seen. The operator training on display prior to this accident was truly shocking. As someone who has been a trainer at attractions for a larger park for the last 2 years, I cringed multiple times trying to write the script for this video. Repeatable, well-defined, consistent steps performed by every operator every cycle is the backbone of modern ride training. Detailed training aids such as operators' manuals are essential for creating safe operations. For some comparison, Glenwood Caverns' operator manual was 3 pages long. The average operator manual at my park is well over 100 pages. A manual that does not even define half the buttons on a ride's control panel is no manual at all, in my opinion, and I truly feel for the operators involved in this accident. Had Glenwood Caverns provided the operators with the manufacturer's manual for training, or created a more detailed operator's manual, this accident could have been avoided completely. Thankfully, more and more parks have been moving to standardize operator training. With companies like International Ride Training and their program International Ride Operator Certification, or IROC, becoming more and more popular, parks have seen an increase in operator professionalism and safety. A map of parks that use IROC is on your screen now. Hopefully, with the rise of programs like IROC, both in the US and around the globe, an accident like this will never be repeated again.